Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. Returning creator Matthew Rosenberg here to talk to us today about the continuation of DC versus Vampires World War V. Issue 1 drops this coming Wednesday, August 14th, officially now under the Elseworlds banner. If anybody's not familiar with the story with the property, Matthew, what's your elevator pitch for it?
Some of the most powerful characters in the DC universe become vampires and plot to take over the world, and pretty much do. That's
Yeah,
it.
the first 12 issue series, and again, it's collected everybody, volume 1, volume 2, and trade paperback. If you need to catch up, they're available. Um, originally, you and James Tynion working on it, and then James left the project. You stayed on it kind of solo, obviously
Mhm.
working with Otto Schmidt, the incredible artist on the book. It seems like you guys were having so much fun, a lot of freedom to do sort of anything you want,
Sure.
character deaths, characters doing hill turns. Can you talk a little bit about having that freedom to do things with these well-known characters that you might not be able to do otherwise in kind of the main continuity?
Sure, yeah. I think the big thing for me was sort of disbelief for a long time. I spent a long time calling our editor Ben Abernathy and just being like, "Can I do this?" And he'd be like, "If it's good for the story, yes." And after about the 10th of those, he had to step in and be like, "Hey, it's our story, man. You do what you want." Because when you're like, "Can I really kill Batman?" And he's like, "Yep." And you're like, "Oh, that's crazy." And that takes about a week. And then you're like, "Can Nightwing do it?" And he's like, "Yep." And it's once that sinks in that there's no rules other than is this a good story? Um, it really is freeing and terrifying all at the same time. And hopefully we've taken that uh to where it needs to go so that the audience is both excited and terrified with us, because that's the goal. We're trying to tell a story of these characters in their darkest worst moments, and who they are, and who they could become. And um that's exciting for me as a fan, so I'm hoping that it connects with other people. And luckily, after the first series, it seemed like it did, because they brought us back for more.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to spoil everybody if you haven't had a chance to check out the first volume, but I'll just say Hal Jordan and a blender. You're in
Yeah.
for a treat if you
Yeah.
have not. Because as you said, Matthew, the sky's kind of the limit here with what you can do. But is there a challenge to be sure that you want the characters to be recognizable, right? Like you don't want them to go so far away from their core.
Sure.
So a little bit of a challenge to make sure you're kind of walking that tightrope.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge challenge, and it's fascinating because I think as a story progresses in the age we live in, where you can you know get feedback from the audience in real time, and I'm at signings and I'm on Twitter and all those things. The really gratifying thing is watching the audience be like, "That doesn't make sense. That doesn't work for me," and then watch those same people an issue later, 2 issues later, be like, "Oh, I get it now, and I see it." And that's what it's about. It's about giving people the unexpected, but also being honest with it, and giving them things that are real. And so, yeah, I mean, we're turning some of the most beloved characters in all of fiction into villains. And it's hard to take, and it's hard to watch, and it's hard to make. It's sad. There's some favorites of mine who are pretty awful. Uh, but it is about finding that balance. And I think, we struggle to do it always because it's so important to us. But I hope that the audience is with us, that it makes sense, when you see evil Nightwing, the way he works and the way he thinks, like it's the logical progression of Nightwing being turned into a man-eating predator. It's who he would be, and it's honest. And the same is true for some of the other characters who become vampires, and also some of the other characters who don't. They're watching their friends die in the world end, and what they're willing to do for that is a big thing. Who's going to become a monster without becoming a vampire is a big part of the series we're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, there was a real sense of tragedy. I mean, first of all, it's DC, right? So you're kind of waiting. Okay, where's the happy ending?
Uh-huh.
And this is not that, because that's not always the best way to tell a story, and it's not always reality, right? Like we don't all have happy endings. The first series covered such a large period of time, and there was such a tragedy to it.
Hmm.
I think when you play it off, characters that are inherently hopeful, like you mentioned, Nightwing, I'll mention, Barbara Gordon,
Sure.
it lends kind of a more weight to the story. Would you say that's true when you're telling such a tragic tale with characters
Oh,
that we're used to having, not that way?
yeah. I mean, for sure. These characters, the reason they're the greatest in the world is because they stand for things, and people just you see Batgirl and you know who she is and what it means. You see Superman and Supergirl and you understand hope and that things are going to be okay. And, you see Batman and you understand there will be justice. And like, we're stripping that away. Like, there's nothing guaranteed. And, in a lot of ways, the book is an allegory for a lot of things. And it's about, divisions in our society, and it's about war, and it's about, you know, the changing planet. But also it's about characters, and it's about people, and who people are in their darkest moments and in their most tragic moments. And part of that is, yes, that on a long enough timeline, every story is a tragedy. And um, our timeline isn't that long, but it's a pretty tragic one. But the fight's not over, and that's the great thing is about the DC universe is that we've taken out some of the biggest and the best characters early by design because we wanted to give other characters the chance to be the heroes that the fans have always known they are and always loved that about them. And so you're seeing a story now that's about Green Arrow and Damian Wayne and Black Canary and Steel and Jaina from the Wonder Twins and Supergirl and all these characters who um, are going to be the new Wonder Woman and the new Batman and the new Superman and the new heroes to save the world. And that's who we're going to pin our hopes on. They're the front lines of hope and humanity, and it's exciting and to be able to tell that.
Yeah, and again, kind of a heavy story at times, like we're saying, everybody, but don't for a second think this isn't all out fun and all out action. And that's kind of really sort of pushed to the forefront by the fantastic art from Otto Schmidt, who, colors his own work, and
Sure.
he's getting a chance to really cut loose with some, fantastic scenes, fight scenes and versions of these characters that we haven't seen before as vampires and what have you. So what's the experience been like collaborating with him? Does his ability and talent level really let you go sky's the limit in terms of ideas and what you want to put in the book?
100%. I mean, Otto is bar none one of the best in comics. He can do it all. He has, there's big things that you expect from a superhero artist. He's going to be able to draw a fight scene that's awesome and breathtaking. He's going to be able to draw action. He's going to be able to draw characters and they're going to look cool. But he also can make things beautiful. He can give things emotion. He's great with acting. So like, the seduction of Barbara Gordon by Dick Grayson, like I was like, that has to work. You have to believe that she's being seduced, and that's second nature for Otto. You have to feel the pain of Damian Wayne at the loss of some of his family. Like you have to feel it. You have to feel the anger of Green Arrow, and the calming touch of Black Canary to temper that anger. And he just does it. And then of course, he has a great sense of design. So now we're getting evil versions of these characters and they look cool as hell. And, McFarlane Toys has done an awesome job of turning a bunch of them into action figures that are on my shelf over there. So that's an honor always. But yeah, I mean, I'm just for the new book, we're like more redesigns of evil characters, more designs of characters living in the end of the world. What does Green Arrow look like? And as we enter an ice age and everyone he knows is dead, like what does he look like? What does Jaina look like? What does Supergirl look like? And so that's really been fun to just let him cut loose like that.
Yeah, to your point of the quieter moments, I mean, the big battle's already it's already happened in the first volume, everybody. So in a lot of ways, I mean, obviously there's still action because they're still battling, but now between vampire factions, and then we still have the heroes as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, the world has kind of passed on. So it is a little bit more intimate. It's vampires, so it's dark. It's happening at night. Those quiet moments, I think, almost allow Otto to shine more than those big action sequences.
Yeah, I mean, that's for a writer, that's a joy to have someone who that like a conversation of two people looking out over a ruined city is going to hit as hard as that city being ruined.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Otto is that guy exactly. He's exactly the artist to give you that. And um yeah, I mean this book starts and it's a Cold War. The war is there's skirmishes and there's fights and there's some people getting killed, but yeah, the big battle happened. But it's a fragile Cold War, so I don't want to give the impression that there isn't a bigger battle coming because there is. I would urge people if they're checking it out and like, oh, okay, uh, get to issue 6. If we haven't sold you by issue 6 and what's coming, I don't think you're sellable because issue 6 is this round, me calling Matt Levine, the editor on the book, and being like, can we do this again? And him being like, yes, we have to do that. And so there's real crazy stuff coming. But yeah, no, the book is full of these sort of more introspective moments for these characters. They're trying to figure out who they are in this new world. And that's a big part of it for sure.
I mean, mixing these two sort of tropes, right? Like superheroes, DC superheroes, classic, been around for decades, known the world over. This idea of vampires, as a myth and a monster, same, been around even longer than DC heroes,
Sure.
and certainly an idea that people have gotten used to. There's something about vampires and vampire stories that's kind of inherently political, I feel like, and maybe it's the immortality function of it. If you have the society that lives forever, politics are just, eventually going to become a part of that. You're really kind of leaning into that a little bit as well with the different factions. Is that fun? Does it feel necessary? Is it a challenge? Is it kind of all of the above?
I feel like it's, the thing about vampires that when we started the book, me and James Tynan went out to dinner and we were talking about it, and we both had a thing about vampires that we loved that I realized later were like the same thing. And he said, I love that they're a monster that seduces you. I love that they're secret, that they're inside your house, that they're people and you don't realize it. And I was talking about how I love that there's a hierarchy and like it becomes a familial structure. It becomes, but also a monarchy. They're a family and they're a royal family. And I was like, it's so fascinating that people just genetically fall into this sort of get rewritten to fall into this thing where there's a king and a queen and there's lords and they follow them. And I was like, it really allows you to play with the power structure of these characters. And that has been both of those things together, I think are yes, like it's natural story. It's natural politics. It's real world politics and it's life and it's really fertile ground for storytelling because in our story, we have characters who don't fall into this mold and they are not the person you think they are. And also they don't fit into this structure. And the big one, of course, for us is Damian Wayne, who is a vampire, who is a vampire terrorist. He wants to tear the whole structure down. And, he's a character who comes with from having a foot in both worlds of hero and villain. And he's a character who comes with a really complex relationship to family. So it makes sense that he is a vampire who are our villains, but is also not exactly a villain, but also is not exactly not a villain. And just like things like that just you get these things that are built into the vampire mythos that just when you lay them down on top of the DC universe just makes sense to you. You see it from 1,000 feet up and it all just sort of clicks. And that to me is the joy of something like this is finding out where these characters are rigidly defined because you know them and you've known them your whole life and where they're malleable. And that's, the fun in the story, I think.
Yeah, one of the things about the project, and this struck me probably maybe 3 or 4 issues into the first volume. It's so good and it's such an interesting idea, but it's, as you said earlier, kind of flipping things on their head with characters you think that will do a certain thing, but because they're a vampire, everything is different. It's one of these things like this idea is so good, it surprises me that this hasn't been out there before, like this mixture of things.
Yeah. I mean, you come across these ideas, and this was James's idea. James and Ben Abernathy had this idea, and when they called me about it, I was kind of like, well, of course, like,
Yeah.
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 I was like, you don't have to sell me on it. Like, you just hear it and your mind races with story, because they're both such rich ideas and worlds. And luckily, there are awesome DC Universe vampire books before. Some of my favorite Elseworlds books are DC vampire books. So we're borrowing from that, but obviously, like, vampires have a great place in comics history if you go back to like EC stuff and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's great, and obviously, we're getting other vampire superhero crossovers. Jed McKay out there doing great work, and I get it. It's fun. I'm happy to be making more, and I'm happy to be reading more, because it is such rich, fun, fertile ground.
Yeah, 100%. So, again, highly encourage everybody, go and read the first volume, the first two trade paperbacks, and I think there's even a hardcover that collects the first volume. But for anybody that hasn't had a chance to check that out, Matthew, what do you feel like you might want to share, or that they would need to know moving into this second volume, World War V?
I would just say that the power structure. We set out to make sure you could jump in on this issue. You don't need to know anything, but if you want a little primer, vampires plotted to take over the world and pretty much succeeded. So a lot of the greats are gone, and what we're left with is this skeleton crew of heroes and villains trying to keep humanity alive from the vampire power structure in a world that's dying. And so you're going to see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people who haven't had time to shine as much as they should, I feel like, getting to step up. But also, I don't want to spoil anything, but, maybe you're going to get a new Green Lantern in there, and maybe you're going to get a Batman's going to come back. And how's that possible? That if you're a fan of the big guns, they're not gone. Wonder Woman has some real badass moments in this book, and Supergirl has some badass moments. So we're trying to make something for everything, for everybody, and we're just having fun, and it's dark fun, but it's fun.
So with this new volume coming out, and again, we don't want to spoil. You mentioned issue 6.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something in this first issue, maybe second issue, where you mentioned being online and feedback or what have you? Is there a moment coming up when I ask that question where I can't wait to see what people have to say about this? You don't have to spoil it, but just give us.
I think the last page of issue 1 is gonna, I may take the day off Twitter on that day. People are gonna have some things to say, and the last page of issue 2 is the opposite. I think the last page of issue 2 is a hopeful moment, and it's maybe my favorite moment in the book. It's one of my favorite characters stepping up in a way that we haven't seen them before, but makes perfect sense to me, and is I think you're gonna get a lot of people who are very into the end of issue 2, in the same way that a lot of people are going to be very mad at the end of issue 1.
Well, be sure you're picking up issue 1, everybody. Again, it's out on August 14th. Thanks for taking the time, Matthew.
Yeah.
Really love the first volume, and looking forward to this new volume, World War V. So thanks for joining us. You can find the Comic Source podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or whichever podcasting app you prefer. Please tell all your friends about us, subscribe, and rate us. The ratings really help with our visibility and our ability to reach new listeners, especially 5-star reviews on Apple. Also be sure to visit us at lrmonline.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover all our other great pop culture content. If you want to email us, the email address is thecomicsourceblog@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/thecomicsource. Do a search for The Comic Source on Facebook and Instagram to follow us on those social platforms. All 3 spots are great places to find out when we release new episodes, as well as follow all our convention coverage. So once again, we want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.